Now, there is a season that the church has celebrated for many years, and they use the term Christmastide. Who's heard of Christmastide before? Okay. Christmastide is a phrase that is to celebrate the season of Christmas. Some people celebrate Christmas not for one day, not for two, but for 12. Who wants to celebrate Christmas for 12 days? Yay! Okay. Well, somehow we've lost that tradition a little bit, but you can all bring it back personally in your home. And today, it's still Christmastide because it starts on Christmas, and it is 12 days from then on, and that's where we get songs, like, with a lot of birds in them, 12 Days of Christmas. But the history of Christmastide is that there was a time to celebrate Jesus' birth more than just one day, because it changed the whole world. It changes every day of our lives, the fact that Jesus, God, came in the form of a human and came to this earth. And so Jesus' birthday is a big deal, not just on one day, but and not even just on 12 days, but every day. And so today we still have our Advent candles and some of our Christmas decorations, just extending Christmastide a little bit, even though we don't have any birds for the 12 days of Christmas. And that's great because I have an irrational fear of birds.
Bird phobia.
Yeah, I have a bird phobia. He's already knows about that. Yeah. Okay, so today, we're going to tell a story that happens after Christmas, after the day of Christmas, as a part of Christmastide. And it is the story of the Magi, or the three wise men. Now, how many of you have seen a nativity set that the wise men are at the manger? Okay, now, I'm not trying to say something's wrong with your nativity sets, but we are positive that the wise men were not at the birth of Jesus that specific day. They came later on. And so this story is actually just after Christmas story. It might have actually been a few months that it took for the wise men to come visit baby Jesus. But it's just as important in the moment as the other characters are. And so we're going to talk about them today. And I thought it would be fun for Brandon to be quizzed and tested on his potential role on staff by needing to read this beautiful children's book, a book for everybody, to all of us today. This is The First Christmas by theologian N.T. Wright, his children's, everybody version. And depending on how this goes for Brandon, you guys can decide if he gets to be on staff or not, okay? Now, the first thing you need to do to help Brandon out is to get one of the stars out of your bag. The star, some of you know, is the Star of Wonder, is my sweatshirt I made. It is a pretty important part of the story of the three wise men. And so every time the star is mentioned, or stars, what I want you to do is to raise your star up, just, to encourage Brandon. Maybe try to throw him off a little bit, see if he can handle it. All right, so every time we hear star or stars, what are we going to do? Star. Okay.
Nice.
Don't do it unless you actually hear it, though. Don't jump. Okay. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
He's got this. All right, let's do it.
Far away in the east, some wise men were studying the stars. Nice. When a bright new star appeared in the night sky, they realized a new king had been born. Let's go and find this newborn king and worship him, the wise men said. They rode on their camels, following the bright star all the way to the city of Jerusalem. I feel like I should do this.
Ooh, yes. Very
I know
nice.
It's behind me too, but okay.
Artistic.
When they got to Jerusalem, they hurried to a big palace where they found an old king named Herod, but they did not find baby Jesus. There's no newborn king here, Herod said, sounding worried. But when you find him, come back and tell me so that I too can go and worship him. So the wise men climbed onto their camels and continued their journey, still following the star. The star led the wise men to a house in Bethlehem where they found Mary and Joseph and the baby Jesus. The wise men knelt and kissed the baby's tiny feet. Then they gave Jesus 3 special gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. These were presents fit for God's promised king. When it was time for the wise men to go home, they did not go back to King Herod. God had warned them in a dream that Herod wanted to find the baby and make sure that Jesus would never grow up to be the king. When Herod realized that the wise men were not coming back, he was furious. But by then, Herod was too late. Jesus had already escaped. An angel had visited Joseph in a dream again and told him to take Mary and Jesus to the country of Egypt. There, they could live in safety, far away from Herod. Mary, Joseph, and Jesus stayed in Egypt until once again an angel came to Joseph in a dream. The angel told Joseph that Herod was dead and that it was safe to return. Only then did Mary, Joseph, and Jesus make the long journey back to their home in the land of Galilee. The end.
How do you feel like you did? Good? Okay, we'll let you stay on staff. We'll let you join staff. One more round of applause for Brandon. We'll let you go sit down. Thank you so much. Of course, we weren't going to actually have that be your test, but it's funny. Okay, so everyone actually has 2 stars, and the reason being is that there wasn't 2 stars in the story. There's just one star of wonder, and I think we call it that in a lot of ways because it's the one time that God really used a star to direct people like this. And so when you take these stars, you can put them together. Let's see here. And it makes a 3D star. Ooh, yes. And it can sit up somewhere. You can set it somewhere. There we go. Ooh, okay. Now, as we continue on thinking about the story a little bit, we think about these wise men, and the star was really important because it guided them to Jesus. And when they got to Jesus, it says that, what did they do right away? They worshiped him. Now, I'm not sure they kissed his little feet, but theologian N.T. Wright says that they did. So we're going to go with that for today. But what else did they do to show that Jesus was the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords? They knew he was the most powerful king there was ever going to be because they were wise people. So what else did they do to show honor to him? Yeah, they brought him gifts. Inside your bag, you have a little bag of gold and frankincense and myrrh. Now, yes, the gold is not real gold, because Brandon says now we cannot spend $400 per bag on a piece of gold. I looked it up. I think this little piece of gold would be $400 if it was real gold. But this is real frankincense and real myrrh. It can sometimes be in oil form. This is a resin form, and it's often used as like an incense or something like that. And so you can take it out of the bag if you want to hold it. Now, if you're curious, the darker color, this is the myrrh. This darker colored one. And then the frankincense is the lighter color. And if you want to pick up a whole bunch of it later, you can come up. But otherwise, you all have a little piece of gold and frankincense. Well, of frankincense and myrrh and something to represent gold. So one at a time, let's talk about each of these gifts for just a minute. The gold, because each of them are really important. The gold is to represent Jesus' kingship, okay? Jesus was not just a king, he is the King of Kings, okay? The greatest leader that ever has lived. Why? Because he wasn't just a human, he was also God. God coming to the earth in human form. So Jesus' kingship is represented by this valuable gift of gold. Now, frankincense was also very valuable at that time. And so frankincense was given to Jesus to represent his divinity, which means the fact that he is God. So gold for his kingship as a human, but also his divinity, frankincense, because he was God. And then the third gift is really interesting. Myrrh is actually something that at that time people would bring to a funeral as a special thing to honor someone who has died. And so the fact that these wise men are bringing this to this new little baby is kind of odd. Except that we now know, when we look back on the story, that Jesus would sacrifice his life. And he would come back to life, but that he would give his life out of love. And so the myrrh represents Jesus' sacrifice. The fact that he loved the world so much that he came to save the world that he loves, and he would do anything to show that love to us. So it's amazing that the wise men were wise enough, first of all, to figure out that this star would lead them to this baby king. And then it was pretty amazing that they had these very important symbolic gifts that they gave. But the most amazing thing that they did was save Jesus' life. They saved his life. Because remember that mean King Herod? Maybe it wasn't described in the book as well, but this was a guy who was not a very good king. He had really done some mean things. He had hurt some people really bad. And so he lied to the wise men when he said he wanted to go worship King Jesus. He did not want to worship him. He was threatened by him. He wanted to be the only king. And so what they realized, because of a dream, God spoke to them and said, don't let Jesus, baby Jesus and his family go to King Herod. He does not want to worship him. He's threatened by him. He wants to do whatever it takes to make sure that Jesus doesn't grow up to be a king because he wants to be the only king. And so they end up having to leave. Jesus' family, Mary and Joseph, and little baby Jesus had to go to a whole other country. They had to travel a very dangerous journey, probably over 2 weeks by foot, to get to Egypt so that they would be safe from King Herod, because he was out to make sure that there was no chance that Jesus could be a king. And so what happens was they get to Egypt, and it wasn't until an angel told them that it was safe that they came back. And we don't exactly know how long that was, but it could have been years. Most likely when Jesus was coming back, he was a little boy, a little toddler. He wasn't a baby anymore. And they were able to come back home to Galilee. But for years, they had to live away from their home out of fear for their lives. Now, when you think about this story, the story of the wise men, the story of how Mary and Joseph traveled to keep Jesus safe, what did you notice were the different ways that God led people in this story? Yeah, okay, good. Yes, all right, the star. God led the wise men to Jesus through a star. How else did God lead? Dreams. Yeah, there was a number of dreams that were telling people what God was inviting them to do and how to move. What else? Angels, that's the third one. There was angels that spoke. Sometimes the angels talked to the people while they were awake, sometimes when they were sleeping. But God cared about these people and was leading them through these different things. And what I want you to know today is that God is still leading us. God is still leading us in our lives. As we think about next year, about 2026, God wants to lead you and you and you and me as we go through this next year. Now, I've got one more gift for you in the bag. You can pull it out. This is a bargain a bargain level compass that mostly works. Now, how many of you have used a compass in real life before? How many of you have used it to get out of the woods? You were lost in the woods and you actually got out because of a compass. Okay, amazing. Now, if you hold this compass, and anyone, any kids or teens, you might want your adults to help you with this. If you hold it really, really still, because of the magnet of the earth, the magnetism of the earth, it pulls towards the north, and so the arrow points to the north. So according to our compasses, which way is north? Yeah, exactly. And so if you line up the little N that represents north with the arrow, then it helps you to know all the other directions. So which way, according to our little compass today, is south? Yeah. Which way is west? Yep, good. And then east. In the story, we saw a lot of these directions. Where did the wise men come from? The east. Which way did they have to travel to get to Jesus? West. And then when Jesus and his family need to flee to Egypt for safety, they go southwest, but mostly south, to be able to go. Now, here's something I wish was true, and maybe the adults will understand this, but I hope you all do. Wouldn't it be awesome if this was like a life compass, and whenever you were confused about what to do in life, it just told you what to do? Does anybody else wish they had a life compass? I would take one. Now, some of you might still be praying for one of them. Some of you are maybe like me and you've accepted we're not going to get a life compass or a map or any other thing that's going to tell us the future. But that doesn't mean that God doesn't still want to lead us. Just like a compass can help us figure out our way, God wants to speak to us and lead us. There was this one special time with the Star of Wonder, but God still speaks to us in dreams. How else does God speak to us and lead us? God leads us, Jesus leads us when we read the Bible, and there's things in the story that stick out to us, and we feel that in our mind and heart. I wonder if God is saying something to me. Sometimes when we're praying, we talk to God, which is great, but sometimes we could actually stop talking and listen, and there might be something we feel in our mind or our heart that God and the Spirit of Jesus might be wanting to say to us. Jesus told us that even though he physically left the earth, His Spirit was going to stay with us forever. In fact, not only that, His Spirit could be within us if we're willing to let His Spirit within us, which means that sometimes we might be directed by God through our emotions, our feelings, sometimes through thoughts that God might give us, our imagination, many different things. Sometimes God leads us through other people, especially really wise and thoughtful and trustworthy people in our lives. They can help us to say, what is God saying and what is God doing? Now, if you're a kid or a teenager, you might want to talk to one of your adults about the fact that even as you become an adult, it's still really hard to know what God is saying and how God is leading, right, adults? Has anyone got it figured out? Because we can talk later because I want to know. Okay, and you know what? We shouldn't be surprised by that. It actually tells us in the Bible that the way in which we hear from God or see God is going to be a little bit fuzzy right now on earth. And that's maybe a little bit frustrating, but it's okay. It means that sometimes, was that God? I don't know. And that's why we bring other people in and we wonder about it and we can be curious about, is God speaking to me? What is God saying? How is God leading? Guess what's going to happen for every single person in 2026? You're going to have to make decisions. It doesn't matter how old you are. Even if you're a kid, you got decisions to make about what you're going to, maybe activities you're going to do. Maybe you have to decide if you're going to be friends with that new person that comes back to school next month. You have decisions. We all have decisions to make. And Jesus cares about all the decisions that we make. And we can turn to Jesus in every single decision. And when it feels kind of fuzzy and you're not really sure, here is my key for you today. Remember this. Jesus is our true north, okay? That's why I wrote this on this little card 500 times for all of you. And thank you to all the people who packed bags of these things. I know some of you are here. Now, what do I mean by that? Jesus is our true north. Well, if you're trying to use a compass to figure out which way to go, you look for north, like we just did, right? If you're trying to figure something out in your life, I want to encourage you, look to Jesus. Look to who Jesus is, Jesus' life. Ask this question, does this point me to Jesus? Maybe you were praying. Maybe you had some feelings. Maybe this is from God. Maybe you saw something in the Bible and you thought, I wonder if this is helping me in my life right now. The great question for us to ask is, does this point me to Jesus, our true north, pointing in the direction of Jesus? It makes us ask questions like, wise questions like, does this look like Jesus' life we see in the Gospels? If I say yes to this or I do this thing, is that going to be like how Jesus would live? Is that something that Jesus would do? Sometimes it's hard to know, but that's a great, wise question. Sometimes you could ask a question like, if I'm going to do this thing, is that going to make me feel closer to Jesus in my heart? Or is that going to make me feel farther away from Jesus? We might ask that question about what we do with our time or our money or our jobs or activities that we might choose. Is that going to help me feel closer to the heart of Jesus? Or is that, when I think about that and pray about that, does it make me feel farther away from Jesus? Jesus is our true north, and that's why we learn all these stories about what Jesus did on earth, but Jesus' Spirit is still with us. So whenever we're lost in the woods, not lost in the woods for real, but when we feel like who has felt like you're making a decision in life and you feel lost in the woods? I have. Remember that Jesus is your true north. And if you always turn towards Jesus, even if you're confused and you're not sure, you'll never get too far off the path. If you always turn back to Jesus, it will help you get back out of the woods if you feel lost in the woods. So next year, 2026, maybe some of you are excited. Is anyone excited for 2026? Okay, we got some people who are excited. Does anyone feel a little bit uncertain about 2026? Yeah. Is anybody willing to say they feel a little bit nervous about 2026? Yeah, that's okay. What we know for sure is that Jesus will be with us no matter what happens next year. And in all the things that we'll have to decide and all of the times we feel unsure, Jesus cares about those times and is with us and is leading us, even if it's difficult to know exactly how sometimes. What we know for sure about 2026 is very little, but we know that Jesus will be going ahead of us, that Jesus watches over us, that Jesus is coming behind us to support us, that Jesus is next to us as our friend, but also that His Spirit can live within us to help us no matter what we face, whether it's wonderful or difficult or something in between. We have the opportunity to remember that Jesus is our true north. So I want to encourage you maybe to take this little compass. I've noticed that I can go through many days without thinking about how Jesus is leading me. But if we put this maybe in a place that we will remember and see it, we can start the new year saying, Jesus, every day I want to know how you're leading me. Lead me every single day, whether it's in small things or the big things I need to decide. So maybe put this little compass somewhere to remind you of that as you go into this next year.